those that invest in with us. We also seek to find folks that are of like mind and spirit, and who bring a strong sense of not only passion but compassion to the nature of their work. She is an Episcopal missioner. Is that
staff officer?
Staff officer. Yes. It's not that. Okay. Yeah. General agencies, they change titles. And, she's about the only general agency person I know in all the denominations that I interact with that actually answers their phone and documents fully where they're actually at and shows evidence of the work that they actually do. But she is a stalwart in the life of the Episcopal Church, and about 2 years ago, I believe it was, she, in partnership with local congregations here, with the Rev Lawler and others, brought a pilgrimage, put together a pilgrimage of millennials from the Episcopal Church. And her bringing, or inviting, leading them with her team here has taken Ferguson beyond its boundaries and has begun to create and ignite movement that is truly changing this country and ultimately this world. And so Heidi, while she's a layperson in the church, she is a leader among their work in racial reconciliation and transformation. And she's just the coolest sister that you'll ever meet. And so without further ado, I want to invite our friend and our sister from the staff office of the Episcopal Church, Sister Heidi Kim.
Ready? All right. Thank you. So I got a document that I I'm the staff officer for racial reconciliation for the Episcopal Church, and had the great pleasure of first visiting Ferguson in 2014, December of 2014, when I got to meet Father Steve and Pastor Willis and learn a little bit about the wonderful people and movements and community organizing developments that were happening in Ferguson, as opposed to getting the sort of CNN sanitized version of only trying to show death and despair. So today I'm going to talk about solidarity, and I'm going to talk about three things. And this is to try to keep in that 10-minute range of time so that we can actually walk over to Canfield Green. First, I want to talk about distinctions between politics and faith. Second, I want to talk about when we experience tragedy, oppression, marginalization, what do we learn from those experiences? And third, I want to talk about the importance and the call of solidarity. And it's really good that Father Steve and Dr. Lightsey went first, because there's a lot of stuff I don't have to explain now because they already talked about it. One of the things that I say in my ministry is that being in right relationship has to be more important than being right. Being in right relationship has to be more important than being right. So that means, particularly as a Christian community, that even though your senior warden in the Episcopal Church or the elder of your church voted for somebody different than you still have to talk to them. You still have to greet them in fellowship. You still have to remember that they are also beloved children of God in the body of Christ. So during political presidential election years, it's very difficult to think about and embrace and love the diversity of the body of Christ, because politics are about winners and losers. And we can see very much, I know in our church, we're about 50% Republican, about 50% Democrat, something along those lines. And we act as though everybody sort of thinks and votes the same way. And we act as though that kind of unity or universalism, as Dr. Lightsey was saying, it is a good thing, that we don't actually want to have any kind of discussion about what those differences might mean and how our disagreements might actually enrich us. In the Episcopal Church, we say that our primary mission is for all people to be reconciled with God and with one another. And to me, I think that journey of trying to be reconciled with God is what gives us the strength and the invitation to be reconciled with one another. Because even if that person over there who just said a really heinous thing to me is, somebody that I'm really having trouble being in relationship with, God loves that person, and I have something to learn from the fact that God loves that person, even though I may be struggling with that in the moment. And I want to talk about what do we learn from these moments of oppression. I'll give a story from my family. I was born in South Korea. Or I should say I was born in Korea because, as my Korean immigrant mother would say, there's no such thing as North Korea and South Korea. That's an artificial construct created by the United States in league with Japan. So I was born in Korea. We immigrated to the United States. For my parents' generation, they grew up under Japanese colonization. So what the Japanese were doing in Korea is very much what European settlers did here in the United States and North America, which is to find the people who were there, try to wipe out their culture, wipe out those people, turn them into something else, and then invisibilize them. So for my parents, their primary experience of racial antagonism was with the Japanese. So in the United States, people will say, we all look alike. But I was so excited when I met Rosanna last night because we have exactly 100% increase in the number of Asian people that usually show up at these events. So my sister over here, we were like, yes, 2 of us. So my parents grew up with the Japanese. You don't buy a Japanese car. You don't covet anything that comes from Japan. My parents both spoke fluent Japanese because they grew up under the colonization. And yet when they immigrated to the United States, they became friends with many other Japanese Americans, because while the Japanese were oppressing people throughout East Asia, Japanese Americans were being interned in the concentration camps in the United States during World War II. So my parents come to the United States, experience anti-Asian racism, and become friends with Japanese Americans and are in solidarity with Japanese Americans. And that kind of reconciliation, I think, only can come from God. It's a visible sign of God's presence with us. That the people that they were sort of raised up, the social milieu in which they grew up, was that they were supposed to always hate these people, and yet these people became our friends and allies, right? These people. There's another piece of that, the intersectionality piece and the invisibility, which I'm so grateful for Dr. Lightsey's comments. There is a way in which progressive white folks in our churches see, I would say they have a voyeuristic view of what I would call people of color grief porn. That there is a kind of way that sometimes progressive folks in the church with a lot of privilege, it's not just white folks, maybe an economic privilege, educational privilege, see the suffering of others, and then they kind of pat themselves on the back, like, you should clap for me because I showed up at your conference because I'm really an ally with you. Or as Pastor Willis was saying, people who say they want to get involved, but then they don't show up here after being invited. And there's a way that we can sort of say, oh, well, we passed a resolution in the Episcopal Church that says that we're going to make racial reconciliation a focus. And so for some of us who've been in the work for a long time, we say, oh, great, now we're finally going to get started. And for other folks, it's like, it's a symbolic act of how awesome we are, and we've done everything that we need to do. So, the importance of learning from your oppression is that when we engage in learning about the stories of others, we need to understand that the suffering, learning about the suffering, the voyeurism of people of color grief porn, or cis queer folks talking about trans queer folks porn, grief porn. When we have that lens of like, yes, I'm an ally, I'm so good, I'm solid, I know what I need to know, we miss so much. And another example that I will give is when I was in Ghana earlier this summer in July. And my Ghanaian colleague, who was there kind of leading this group of us on pilgrimage in Ghana, said, there actually have been a lot of Korean business people who've come to Ghana. And you see Samsung and Hyundai and all of these things kind of all over Ghana. And then she said, and then there was this sort of period where there are actually a lot of Ghanaian and Korean children, because these businessmen came, they had children with Ghanaian women, and then they left. These children, multiracial children, are left behind. And I was thinking, oh, you mean like how Korean people have complained about how the Japanese came in and raped our young women, the comfort women, or how the US military came in and these Americans had children with Korean women and then left. It's sort of the modern day Madam Butterfly, but Koreans are doing this in Ghana. And a lot of those Korean people would still say, well, we suffered so much under Japan, so, Samsung becoming a multinational conglomerate that's everywhere in the world, this is just we're finally kind of getting our due, we're getting our reparations from that horrible period. And so, we've learned the wrong lesson. We've learned the lesson of, well, when we get that kind of privilege, we're going to go take advantage of that. We're going to go take advantage of our entitlements. And if you come up to me privately later when we're not Facebook Live, I'll tell you the funny story of when I was talking about the Korean and Ghanaian children. I guess we call them Malaysian, where I'm from. Anyway, so the call to solidarity, the privilege that you bring into other communities. This is a really important thing, because people sometimes say, well, we want you to come and be a keynote speaker because you know so much about racial reconciliation. I'm like, well, I know some stuff about racial reconciliation, but the reason why I go to places is so that I can learn more and steal all y'all's ideas. And I'm consistently reminded of things that I don't know. So one thing that happened when I was here is that a gentleman stood up and said, I'm just going to be really forthright and say that the oppression of young Black men in the United States is the most significant and important oppression anywhere in the world, and that is what we need to focus on right now. And it took me back to my early feminist education when I was in college in the early 80s. And there we used to say, all the Blacks are men and all the women are white, but some of us are brave. And I was not a Black woman. And I so resonated with that statement. And I thought, wow, what he's saying, I get that that's a political strategy. The immediacy of what's happening here in St. Louis, that young Black men are shot down. And my colleague, Mike Angel, was telling me that the mayor of Ferguson, or the police chief, somebody's publishing a book about how we didn't do anything wrong, right? And in the face of that, yes, the immediate political need is to think about the ways that young Black and brown bodies are being targeted. I would say that's also women, and I'm saying that we're also targeting children. Let's be very clear about that. We're targeting the children. And I also thought, okay, yes, that's the immediate political need, but what is the long-term picture? And I thought, well, white supremacists are probably really excited when somebody says something like that, because then they know that we're not going to talk to each other, right? And so one thing that I could have taken from that, when we had a very diverse group of 25 young people, I saw the two Native American men, both of whom identify as gay, were sitting there and looking at that and saying, okay, I can check out now. And so it was sort of felt like that was where we needed to go deeper, to have that discussion like, okay, why are you saying that in this time, and how can we be in solidarity with you? And when we didn't have that opportunity, that comment invisibilized part of the Black Lives Matter movement, and it also invisibilized the struggles of other folks who were in the room. And it was an opportunity, though. And I wish that we could have, had more time to really dig down on that and thinking about intersectionality. Because the persistence of white supremacy in the theology of most of our churches and in our notions of democracy in the United States will continue to target Black and brown bodies with violence, with death, with imprisonment. And so I, as a Korean American, and my children, my 2 daughters, are not as likely to be targeted by the police. And that doesn't mean that I get a free pass. That means that I need to be going into the places where I can go. So part of what I have going for me when I talk to mostly white folks in our church about race and racism is that I show up and I'm like a frumpy middle-aged Korean mom, and they just think that I'm gonna not be that angry at them. That's how I am racialized. Another way that I'm racialized is that when the NAACP issued a travel warning for the state of Missouri, I knew that I was definitely going to have to go everywhere with my passport. Because another way that Asian people are racialized is that we are not citizens. I've been a citizen since 1972, in a long time. And that doesn't mean that I get to wallow in my having to take my passport everywhere. It's just something I gotta do, like brushing my teeth in the morning, right? And as people of color living in a racist, white supremacist society, we all have those things that we know that we have to do, and it's not a big deal. And I invite my white sisters and brothers to understand that my having to carry a passport should not become your people of color grief porn. Please don't keep me in the tomb. I want to be able to come out of the tomb. That is a very small part of my life. It does say something about white privilege. And if you keep coming back to me to tell me how bad you feel about that, you are keeping me in the tomb. So the call of solidarity. I visited the Standing Rock Reservation twice last September. Our presiding bishop was there. Actually, the Methodist Bishop O was also there. And it was one of those places where I learned, again, how much I don't know about solidarity. Because as I was listening to folks from the reservation talking about what they wanted, how difficult it was to watch sacred lands being desecrated, and how difficult it was to see people calling them horrible, horrible names. The name that people in North Dakota were using to describe indigenous people was prairie N-word. And thinking about my own complicity in, driving a minivan that's not terribly fuel efficient. And so, that oil pipeline that is affecting them is partly driven by my complicity in a system that means that they're going to have difficulty getting clean water. And as a person of color living in the United States who is not Native, I began to understand, yes, I have so much to learn here. I need to kind of shut up and listen for a while. And as a young woman was telling a story about an experience that she'd had, I went up to her afterwards and to her mother and I said, that story was so powerful. And her mother kind of took my hand and said, no, we don't say that in our culture. When something lifts us up, we say it's humbling. And I thought, okay, what can we learn from a culture that replaces power with humility? Now that's Jesus for me. The people who were there were modeling what it means to be like Jesus in the world. So, that's my whole spiel. That's all I got. Solidarity. People are still always surprised, like, well, how come, we have something called the Union of Black Episcopalians. Mother Gail and I were there like just a little while ago, and I go to their annual meeting, and it's one of those places where I feel like, I can just be myself, right? It's an affinity group for me. And I have white colleagues or white friends who would say, well, I'm just really nervous about going to that because I just never see very many pictures of white people. I'm like, I am the only Korean person there, and it is okay. And I have so much to learn. And I have learned so much from colleagues throughout the church of all races. And that solidarity is not sort of thinking that we know what we need to know, but remembering and being humble that there is so much that we don't see, that we are conditioned not to see, that even when we are involved in a liberatory movement, we are pushed in a direction that will help us to ignore certain pieces. And I think in our church, we've made a big deal about same-sex marriage. And we're like, yay, we're so good with LGBT people. And I'm thinking about the young trans homeless teens who sometimes are smoking weed in the parking lot of my church. They really don't give a damn about marriage rights in the church. They're just trying to stay alive. So if we can remember what we are able to learn from others, instead of feeling defensive, but recognizing that we are always going to have those blind spots, those places where we have invisibilized our sisters and brothers and our gender fluid folks, and that we have an opportunity to become reconciled to God when we begin to be humble enough to see. I really feel that that is what God is calling us to do in this moment. And I feel very grateful that I get to hang out with people like Pastor Willis and Father Steve and all these other wonderful folks and all of you, because I get to continually be reminded of the beauty of God's creation in the world in all of the ways that seeing that which has been invisibilized will redeem not only me, but all of us. Thank you.
All right, we're going to have a slight change in the agenda because of our moved up lunchtime, so I apologize to our poet Victoria, who will be the first one to speak when we get back from lunch. But if I could invite up our 3 speakers from this morning, if you'd be willing to come up here and answer any questions from anyone in the audience. All right, so if you have a question for any of our speakers, I invite you just to stand up and shout it out. I'm going to pass off the mic so that they can pass it amongst themselves and each other. I invite you to ask questions about the topics that were spoke on today or the work of these individuals that they do on a daily basis.
Dr. Lightsey, can you again give us, Dr. Lightsey, can you again give us your definition of intersectionality?
Yes. My emphasis here, and that is that my emphasis is not on one of connecting sites of oppression, but making sure that we seek to understand those areas that are being invisibilized and lift them up. So intersectionality seeks, as opposed to some, I understand this desire to talk about intersectionality in terms of, universality. But what I'm engaging, or what I sought to engage this morning, is talking about the ways in which persons, because of a particular category, are made invisible to the other primary sites or desired primary sites of oppression. So that is to say, for instance, in a particular example, if one thinks about sexism and racism, the ways in which Black women are affected by both sexism and racism, yet the degree to which, to use an example, Black women had to articulate the experiences of being a Black woman, the sufferings of being a Black woman, in the recent hashtag, the hashtag Say Her Name, because what was being lifted